On September 4th of 2015, Men's Health published an article entitled, "Why You Can't Keep Your Hands Out of Your Pants." The article is a science-based exploration of the phenomenon of men just casually grabbing their junk. And I'm not necessarily talking, playing with yourself. You're sitting around, you give it a little grab. You're just sitting around, you give it a little grab. People don't really talk about it, but it's a thing that you do. And you catch yourself doing it, and you're like, what am I even doing here? One of the theories that was presented in this article is that this is some kind of evolutionary instinct to protect yourself. If you're at home trying to relax, it stands to reason that you'll be more relaxed if your junk is protected. Vanessa Van Edwards, who researches human behavior, told them, "You can think of the hand there like insurance against a friend who might give him a nut jab, or a kid who accidentally hits a ball at them."
My groin!
It's an instinct that served us well throughout evolutionary history. But if you watch my channel long enough, you know that not everyone shares our same self-preservation instincts. So for today's video, let's take a look at men who have mutilated themselves in horrifying and sometimes comedic ways. This video is sponsored by Cook Unity. The past year or so, I've gotten really into cooking, but sometimes I just don't have the time. If I want to eat something right away, I usually keep in some microwave dinners, but they're not that great. And I always wish for something like this that's better than what they have at the supermarket. That's where Cook Unity comes in. Cook Unity is a subscription service that delivers freshly prepared meals by real chefs to your door weekly. The subscription is super flexible and you can pause, skip weeks, or cancel at any time. The meals are made at kitchens that are close to you with real ingredients and not slop produced at a warehouse. Cook Unity chefs offer up a wide range of meals for over 7 different dietary preference filters, including vegan, paleo, and gluten-free options. Chefs focus on flavor and inventiveness while leaning into a wide variety of different cuisines to give you the best meals possible. The meals are delivered fully cooked, so all you have to do is heat them up. There's no more cleanup or meal planning. Here's some of the meals that I had. I got the Chibujin by Pierre Thiam. I got the spicy braised beef of glass noodles by Esther Choi, who I'm actually familiar with from watching Uncle Roger. But probably my favorite of all the dishes that I got was Amma's chicken thighs by Arthi Sampath, which is a meal inspired by her mother's recipe. These dishes were all prepared at a kitchen close to me in New York and shipped to my door packed in a nice freezer bag with ice. Just go to cookunity.com/wang50 or click the link in the description below and use code WANG50. You'll get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals to try them out for yourself. On April 22nd of 2007, a 35-year-old Polish man entered a Zizi in central London. Zizi is a chain of restaurants with over 135 locations across the UK. They're known for putting their own spin on classic Italian dishes, like their oblong rustica pizza pies, stuffed garlic balls, and fried pasta crisps. Fittingly for this story, Zizi is also a French term for penis. You see, this Polish man was not looking for a menu packed with Italian-inspired dishes with twists in theater, warm and natural restaurants with playful, fun touches, and a team that make you feel like you're among friends. No, what he was looking for was a knife, and he found it in Zizi's kitchen. Stuart McMahon, who is one of the nearly 200 witnesses to this incident, explained it to The Sun. This guy came running in, then charged into the kitchen, got a massive knife, and started waving it about. Everyone was screaming and running out as he jumped on a table, dropped his trousers, and popped his penis out. Then he cut it off. I couldn't believe it. The staff were really upset and there was blood everywhere. I just picture that one bar scene from The Wizard of Gore where there's a dead body in there and people are running in like a circular, cartoonish manner, jumping over the dead body and whatnot, except now they're jumping over the penis. Police incapacitated the man with tear gas, then they collected his pecker from the floor. It was put on ice and he was rushed to the hospital for reattachment surgery, which was apparently the first of its kind in the UK. Although he did make it to stable condition, it's unclear whether or not the reattachment surgery was a success. A urologist who spoke to The Guardian noted that if it didn't take, they may have to cut it off and do it all over again. And if it did work, he'd have still lost sensation and need a penis pump for the rest of his life. After the procedure, the man would undergo a psychiatric evaluation, although as one person who spoke to The Sun noted, he's clearly not a well boy. Our next penile self-harm story is a bit more accidental, and it happens over a very long term. In a Reddit thread entitled, "TIFU, by not cleaning my penis for 16 years, a user named FewNotice9304 details his journey of self-discovery. At the age of 16, he got interested in porn a lot older than a lot of his peers. And up to that point, he had basically no exposure to other men's tunnel snakes.
Tunnel snakes rule!
And it was only at this point that he realized that his didn't quite look like theirs. because most of the men in the porns he was watching were circumcised, whereas he was intact. But he did see some with uncut men, and he noticed that they were able to just retract the foreskin. He had never thought to do that. So, monkey see, monkey do, he tried to do that. But he couldn't because it was so tight. This is a condition known as phimosis. It's relatively common at a young age, but you usually outgrow it. Sometimes people are circumcised to treat this, but it's typically not necessary. Sometimes though, you're not born with it and you develop it as a result of infections or injuries or scars or whatnot. In any case, Notice decides that he's just gonna try to loosen it up himself. I finally started to make progress, but I began to notice a white material under my foreskin. At first, he thought this was just pieces of dried toilet paper, but he would look it up and learn that this was called smegma. But he noticed that, unlike the descriptions he found online, his smegma was very hard. He compared the texture to clay, and he just keeps picking at it. I kept going further and larger chunks became visible. It was like an iceberg, where initially only the tip is showing, but there's a lot hidden underneath. I noticed that each chunk was painful and tender to take off. I got further and further down the head, where eventually, one shower, it slipped all the way down. And that's when he finds the biggest smegma deposit of all. It was burning. My penis head had never been exposed properly, and with the shower water on it, it was so painful. But I kept pushing through to get all the smegma off of the head. It was like it had formed its own map onto my penis, with indents on the head I still have today. And then he noticed the discoloration. Parts of what was now exposed were purple and swollen, while other parts were gray and completely numb. He had a theory on why this was. I was devastated. I could only guess that the gray part was for me sleep fucking with it erect under my stomach face down, and as my penis grew, the hard smegma was constantly rubbing it and damaging the nerves, hence the gray. The swollen purple was most likely from the more recent masturbation. Why did he spell masturbation like that? Masturbation, where I'd forcefully jerk my penis, but not realizing I had clay rubbing the head. He expresses anger at his father for not teaching him better. Anger at himself for not knowing better and possibly stunting his own penile growth. And anger at other men for not having harmed themselves in this way. He notes that in the following years the purple reduced a bit, and the gray parts are still gray, but there's increased sensation now. He also noted though that certain acts such as receiving head can be painful. He describes this first time and having his legs shoot up in pain. We joked about it later like, damn, the head was that good? It jolted life into you? But I hate breaking it to girls, I don't enjoy it. He ends with a PSA to educate your sons and potentially yourself. Although as one commenter pointed out, it could have been worse. You could have found out during your first time. The smell or taste would have been life-changing horrific for the girl. And honestly, at first, this story was sounding kind of phony to me because, I mean, how could you go 16 years of your life and not notice that something was wrong here? But apparently, a few commenters had a similar situation. Like, I guess this is more common than people realize. Same shit almost happened to me, but I managed to salvage it when I was like 13 before it got bad. Couple Google searches later and it all made sense. I guess I should count myself super lucky that I got hit by a giant wave at 14/15 while surfing that somehow made mine fully retract for the first time. By the time I realized why my crotch was feeling so weird, it looked perfectly clean from the salt water, lol. And it's not just these two, there's several comments in the replies from people who learned at a surprisingly old age that they should have been cleaning themselves all these years. And which also gave me the terrible thought that there might be someone watching this video who is just realizing this because of this video. It's not your fault though, it's your parents' fault. I mean, maybe it's your fault a little bit. The next story comes to us from the proud nation of Ghana, land of beautiful, horrifying movie posters, like the tales from the internet one I have for sale in my store. You know, as a kid, I always thought sleepwalking was something that's made up for cartoons. It turned out that quicksand was a thing that they were really exaggerating, and sleepwalking is quite real, and often quite dangerous. But of all the real-life instances of sleepwalking, this is probably the most horrifying one that I've heard. So one night in August of 2022, a 47-year-old farmer named Kofi Ata was preparing dinner for his family. As a farmer, he has access to some of the freshest meat possible. So he takes his knife and he kills one of his goats to prepare for dinner. And then he wakes up, and there's blood everywhere and his balls hurt. As it turned out, he had not slaughtered a goat. Rather, he had slaughtered his own wiener. He starts screaming in pain and his neighbors rush to his aid. And upon finding the horrifying scene, they call his wife, who rushes home to see him holding on to his schmeckle and bleeding out into a pot. She puts a diaper on him to try and stop the bleeding, Which, you know, there's some people in the world that would be like, God, I wish that was me. And then she brings him to the hospital where he receives fluids and injections, and they were able to save his life, but he'd have to wait a bit until getting reattachment surgery. It's important to note that throughout all this, he hadn't even realized what he had done. Until he got to the hospital, he was perceiving all of this as still being part of the dream. But it's like Jamie Josta said, when I wake up, the real nightmare begins. Our next story isn't as graphic, but it's a classic tale of a guy trying to find new and exciting ways to get off and it going horribly wrong. TIFU by spraying Afrin nasal spray up my penis. So Afrin is a nasal spray. It's used for treating allergies and congestion. It's a bit more advanced than a simple saline rinse, like something you'd get from a neti pod or a Navage. And I just considered the possibility of someone putting a Navage in their fucking pee hole, which if you don't know what that is, it's like a nasal irrigation thing with suction. So if someone tried to do that, they would probably, what's the term? They would give themselves like a urethral prolapse, which honestly would be an incredible name for a band. In any case, Afrin isn't just a saltwater rinse, it's a medicated spray, which also means it has more risk of side effects. The poster begins by explaining his reasoning for doing this. I thought that, since it clears up your nose so well, maybe it would clear up the penis in a similar way.
You, sir, are an idiot.
As in, widen the inside of the urethra so cum could shoot out with less resistance. Basically, I wanted to make some epic cum shots. Turns out it doesn't work that way at all. You know, this guy is trying to come up with his own ways to have a big cum, and he never came across the advice to just take zinc and L-arginine. The thing about Afrin though, the way it works is that it's a vasoconstrictor. It reduces irritation by shrinking your blood vessels. Great for a stuffy nose, not ideal for sexual activity. So he's about to get it in with his girlfriend, and he sneaks off to the bathroom to fill himself up with Afrin. He's all set to cocoon this girl in a load like those trapped women in Duke Nukem 3D. But instead, he couldn't get hard because that's how Afrin would work in that situation. Constricting your blood vessels down there is the opposite of what you want. So of course, he explained to his girlfriend why this was happening, and she makes fun of him for it to this very day. Honestly, I'm just in love with his reasoning here. That you could come bigger if only you weren't so stuffed up. Now, when I was working on this video, there was a particular story that I remembered from so many years ago. It's a story that scared me off from using psychedelic drugs because a guy in an LSD-induced rage just cuts his dick off. So I was looking for that particular story, and then I found that this has happened so many times. When you look for it now, the incident that seems to come up the most is one in 2016 France. A group of people were having some sort of get-together in an apartment, and one guy had taken LSD, and he was having a bad trip. He had what witnesses described as a fit of madness. During the fit of madness, he attacks his girlfriend, who had light injuries that needed to be treated at the hospital. He had also at some point partially severed his penis. None of the reports elaborate on how partial, but I'm just picturing like, you ever bite a sausage, but you don't get all the way through the casing, so it just kind of dangles? Something like that is what I'm thinking. The most horrifying part of that though, it's not really clear when he did that. He might have wandered off to the bathroom, did it in there, and then pulled his pants back up and it's just getting smushed all around. The fit comes to an abrupt end when he jumps out of a second-story window. He's not okay. Although he did manage to survive the incident, the permanence of his injuries is unclear. Then you have another situation in 2017 in Chicago. This one has ample photographic evidence, which I mostly can't show you. Police received reports of a naked man on a drug-induced rampage a block away from an elementary school, and he's walking around and bleeding from his crotch as he had previously, as the Sun put it, cut off his todger. According to witnesses, the man began clothed, and then he stripped naked and began bashing in windows and houses and cars. The police arrive at the scene, and he immediately charges at them yelling, "Get out of here, bitch." In a rare occurrence, onlookers are yelling at the police to just shoot the guy. This time though, they actually managed to subdue him with a taser. He was taken into custody and it's unclear what happened to him after. There's another high-profile case like this though that actually gives us more insight into what happens after. On April of 2014, a Wu-Tang Clan affiliated rapper named Christbearer had reached a low point in his life. He was hit with restraining orders that would prevent him from being able to see his children. Needing a way to cope, he turns to drugs. He already had drug problems, but this situation just took him to the next level. And in an interview with Vice, he speaks about what happens next.
PCP is something that can alter reality. You can see something. It's like knowledge. You can see something, and once you see that, you can't never go back. It's like you can be exposed to too much truth, and it can make you nutty. So that night when I had some PCP, I was watching cartoons, and to me, for some reason, life turned into a cartoon. And I had 3 baby mothers, and I had restraining orders on me, so I couldn't see any of my kids. But I figured, man, I keep on having these babies by these girls, and I was thinking they just got a groupies, and then once they have these babies by me, I'm trapped. And they say, hey, I'm gonna need this amount of money for you to be in their life. It started being like society that was just dragging me down into a vortex that I could not stop. Women say, men think with their little head too much. They always think with their little heads. So I said, you know what? I got something for these bitches. I'm gonna cut off my little head, and I'll be forced to only think with my big head. And that was clear as day to me, and I acted upon it.
Shortly after the incident, he also spoke to E about how in control he was. Yes, I was doing drugs that night, but I was in complete control, he said. I cut it off because that was the root of all my problems. My solution to the problem was the realization that sex is for mortals, and I am a god. Those kinds of activities got me into trouble, and I came here to be a god. After working with a psychiatrist following the incident, he came to realize that he had been dealing with severe depression. And like a lot of people, he was using drugs to mask his mental health issues. He also spoke about how he now felt that mental health issues aren't taken as seriously as they should be in the hip-hop community. In another interview with Vice, he also commented that his mental health was made worse by the media frenzy and mockery by celebrities he once admired. Specifically, he calls out Charlemagne. He also notes that although he was a Wu-Tang affiliated rapper, he was basically only known by fans of underground hip-hop, and then all of a sudden he's cast into the mainstream by these insane circumstances. Because of this, he laments that if it was this bad for him, it's probably even worse when things happen to mainstream celebrities. It was initially reported that doctors were unable to attach the part that was cut off, but later it was said that he underwent multiple procedures and did maintain some function. In a BBC documentary, he explained, "When I'm actually having the act of sex, it's not like, oh, I wish I still had my shit. It's like, I'm in there, like it used to be." In 2020, he would get married, and in speaking to TMZ, he noted that everything was in fact fully functional now. He also reflects on the incident once more. "I'm the only man who ever did what the FK I did, and I'm proud of it. Because why? In the annals of history, I don't think you got anybody who ever did it. I might have made the biggest mistake ever in history, but I'm proud of that." Clearly from this video, he's far from the only one, but he's definitely by far the one that's given us the most insight into the person's perspective. And as much as I'd like to end this video on that relatively positive note, I believe that I actually did find the exact story that traumatized me all those years before. It happened in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, all the way back in 2003. An unnamed 34-year-old man with mental health issues, and also a history of self-harm attempts, including stabbing himself in the head with a pair of scissors, had taken some kind of hallucinatory pills. Then one night, he wakes up with voices in his head. Not the Randy Orton style of voices telling him to RKO somebody out of nowhere. Instead, the voices are saying, "Cut your dick off." Who is he to doubt the voices? So he cuts it off. Then he wraps it up in a piece of cloth, and then he cooks it and eats it. Shockingly, he did survive this ordeal, although he would have permanent issues urinating. I actually came across a similar story in Japan, but this act was much more deliberate, done by a performance artist named Mao Sugiyama. Like the foot taco guy, he serves it to people, but there's actually a lot more to this story that it merits its own video, so I guess subscribe to see that one in the future. But anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, check out my video about people whose flesh fused to their seats. I'm out.